So we've talked a lot about the amazing things the Silk Roads brought us, right? All that incredible trade, the flow of ideas, new cultures meeting for the first time, but that's really only half the story. Today, we're going to look at the other side, because the very same roads that brought so much prosperity, well, they also carried plague, war, and just unimaginable destruction. The connections that enriched the world also exposed it to its greatest dangers. Okay, let's dive into this.
You see, the same roads that connected the world also devastated it. In this explainer, we're going to face the four great dangers that traveled these ancient highways: the silent, invisible spread of deadly disease, the terrifying destruction of cities by the Mongols, the constant wars between rival empires, and the holy wars that we know as the Crusades.
Think of the Silk Roads like the motorways of the ancient world. But here's the thing about a motorway. It can't choose who or what travels on it. So along with all those merchants carrying silk and spices, they also transported the most dangerous and invisible passengers in human history: deadly diseases.
And here's how the deadliest of them all worked: the Black Death. It was like a deadly chain reaction. Between 1346 and 1352, the plague basically used the Silk Roads as its own personal superhighway. It started way out in Central Asia, carried by fleas living on rats. These rats then hitched a ride in grain sacks and cargo on merchant caravans heading west. And just like that, the plague got a free ticket to the next town, and the next, and the next.
And this was the result. Just let that sink in for a moment. Between 30 and 50% of the entire population of Europe was wiped out, gone. In some cities, it was more than half. It got so bad that at the Siege of Kaffa in 1347, the attacking Mongol army actually used the plague as a weapon, catapulting infected bodies over the city walls. It was a terrifyingly effective early example of biological warfare. And the ships that fled Kaffa, they carried the disease to the rest of Europe.
The Black Death wasn't the only disease on the move either. Leprosy also spread rapidly along these trade routes. Now, because its effects were so visible, people who had leprosy were intensely feared. They were often thrown out of their own communities, forced to live outside the city walls, and had to ring a bell to warn people they were coming. So you see, the same trade that might bring amazing luxury goods to your city could also bring something you desperately, desperately did not want.
Okay, next we turn to a destructive force of a totally different kind, one that swept across these same routes like a hurricane: the Mongol storm. In 1206, a truly powerful leader named Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes, and with that, he launched one of the most devastating series of conquests in all of human history. His armies moved west along the Silk Roads with terrifying speed, and the great cities in their path became targets.
To really understand the tragedy here, I want you to first picture the city of Merv. It was one of the absolute jewels of the Silk Roads, a massive, bustling center of Islamic science and culture. We're talking magnificent libraries, beautiful mosques, grand palaces. It was a true beacon of civilization.
But in 1221, the Mongols arrived, and after the city surrendered, its people were systematically massacred. Accounts from the time describe a city so completely annihilated that there was literally no one left to bury the dead. In just a matter of days, one of the world's greatest cities was simply gone.
And then in 1258 came what might be the single greatest act of cultural destruction in history. The Mongols attacked Baghdad. Now at the time, Baghdad wasn't just another city. It was the intellectual capital of the entire world. It was home to the House of Wisdom, a legendary library that held centuries of knowledge in science, medicine, and philosophy.
The Mongols destroyed it. They threw hundreds of thousands of priceless, irreplaceable books and scrolls straight into the Tigris River. An eyewitness wrote that the river ran black for days with the ink from all the dissolved manuscripts. Centuries of human knowledge, gone in days.
And you know, it wasn't just the Mongols. For much of its history, the Silk Roads were a battleground. You had all these competing empires fighting for control over the trade routes. I mean, whoever controlled the roads had immense power and wealth. And that meant the roads were often incredibly dangerous places to be.
For centuries, the Byzantine and Persian empires were pretty much always fighting, which made the western parts of the Silk Roads chaotic and super perilous. Then, from 1095 all the way to 1291, European armies launched the Crusades. Their path to the Holy Land cut right across the Middle Eastern trade routes, turning huge areas into active war zones. If you were just an ordinary merchant, the risk was enormous. Many just stopped traveling because they were, quite simply, scared for their lives.
So you might be wondering, how do we actually know about all this devastation? Well, historians rely on something called primary sources. These are accounts written by people who were actually there. And one of the most vivid accounts of the dangers on the Silk Roads comes from a European friar named Giovanni da Pian del Carpine. He actually journeyed through Mongol territory in the 1240s and saw it all for himself.
He wrote, "They destroy towns and fortresses and kill men, sparing none, unless perhaps some artisans whom they keep as slaves." Wow, I mean, that's a raw, first-hand account right there. The only people spared were the skilled craftspeople who could be put to work for the conquerors.
Now, when historians use a source like this, they do something really cool. They analyze two key things. First is the content. What does the source actually tell us? And in this case, it's pretty clear. Total destruction and killing. But second, and this is just as important, is the provenance. Who wrote it and when? Giovanni was a European Christian. It's totally possible his fear and his views on the non-Christian Mongols might have influenced how he wrote about them. A good historian always considers that potential bias.
So, which of these dangers was the worst? The invisible plague that killed millions without a single sword being drawn? The Mongol armies that literally erased entire cities from the map? Or the centuries of constant war that choked trade and made life a nightmare? You know, historians still debate this, but the crucial takeaway for us is that the very connections that brought the world closer together also made it incredibly vulnerable.
Okay, now for a truly sobering fact. Remember the great city of Merv we talked about? At its height, its population might have been over 500,000 people. Well, after the Mongols destroyed it in 1221, a scholar who visited the ruins years later reported finding only 5 survivors hiding in the rubble. Whether that number is exact or just symbolic, it paints this horrifying picture of near-total annihilation.
But even in all this darkness, there were these surprising little moments of humanity. During the Third Crusade, you had 2 famous opposing leaders, King Richard the Lionheart of England and the Muslim Sultan Saladin. They were bitter enemies on the battlefield, and yet they developed this deep respect for each other. When Richard got sick with a fever, Saladin sent him fresh fruit and snow to help cool him down. When Richard's horse was killed in battle, Saladin sent him a new one. War and humanity, both real at the same time.
All right, time for a quick knowledge check. Let's see what you've remembered from our explainer.
Question 1. Between which dates did the Black Death devastate Europe via the Silk Roads? Was it A, 1066 to 1072, B, 1346 to 1352, or C, 1200 to 1220? The correct answer is B. The Black Death spread along the trade routes between 1346 and 1352. Question 2. The Mongols' destruction of Baghdad's House of Wisdom in 1258 was such a major cultural loss because A. They burned silk, B. They destroyed manuscripts, or C. They closed markets. The answer is B. They threw centuries of irreplaceable knowledge in the form of manuscripts into the river.
Question 3. What was the name of the European eyewitness who wrote about the Mongols back in the 1240s? Was it A, Marco Polo, B, Richard the Lionheart, or C, Giovanni da Pian del Carpine? The correct answer is C. Giovanni da Pian del Carpine gave us that vital primary source account of the Mongol conquests.
Question 4. How did the Crusades, from 1095 to 1291, disrupt Silk Road trade? Did they A. make the routes safer, B. have no effect, or C. turn trade routes into war zones? The answer is C. The conflict made traveling far too dangerous for many ordinary merchants.
And the last one, question 5. In source analysis, what does provenance refer to? Is it A, the information in the source, B, who wrote the source and why, or C, the date of the source? The correct answer is B. Provenance is all about figuring out who created the source and what their perspective might have been. That is our look at death and destruction on the Silk Roads. The same routes that connected the world also made it more dangerous. See you next time.